Well, hello and welcome back to Roundtable Mindset. This is Jamie.
And I'm Malin.
And we're back for another episode of Difficult Conversations in Season 2 of Roundtable Mindset. And before we get started on this one, I do want to just put out a little, just a little content warning to let you know that we are going to be discussing some difficult topics like school safety and gun violence and things like that may be part of this conversation, along with other mental health topics. So if that is something that is difficult for you, please make sure to take care of yourself and make sure you have people around you to support you, and come back and listen when you're ready to. So this is a difficult conversation. I know a couple weeks ago you were like, this one's not exciting. This one's kind of hard. And I think this is one of those for me. This is a hard conversation today. So,
well, and the difficult conversation that we're having today is we're talking about safety in schools, which, to your point earlier, to your disclaimer there, we are including guns and gun violence within that. And our guest that we have on today, I'm really looking forward to kind of picking his brain and seeing what's going on with his opinions, because this is a space, and I want to say this is probably the first time we've had a conversation. I'm kind of looking at you with a little bit of a side eye here, Jamie. I think we're on the same side of the fence with this topic, which is not usually what happens.
We're just going to write this down for the history books of Roundtable Mindset. Mark your calendars, friends.
But I think it's kind of cool that we're on the same, I would say the same side for a change, using air quotes, because I think it shows the magnitude of just how difficult it is to talk about school safety and all the different facets of it. I mean, there's not one of us that when we think of safety in our schools, we don't just sit back and go, yeah, we all want the kids to be safe. We want them to be safe from each other. We want them to be safe from the outside world. We want them to be safe and comfortable while they learn. But then you start adding elements to that. And what does that really look like? And it starts making me cringe a little bit. So we actually have somebody who is joining us today. Our guest name is Brett. Brett comes with a variety of experiences. The most notable ones that I want to just touch on before we have him kind of walk through his own formal introductions is he has been a member of a school board as well as a retired police officer. So he comes to us with a vastly rich history of things that I'll never experience, or I haven't experienced yet, right? I've never had to work closely with a school or be on a school board, and I've never been in law enforcement. And I'm really interested on his take on this topic because, again, he'll bring those perspectives and those insights that I just don't have, which will hopefully help me in this discussion.
Yeah. Well, and if I remember correctly, we did a Talk About It Tuesday episode not too terribly long ago about teachers carrying in Iowa, wasn't it? Wasn't that the article that we talked about? I can't remember for sure, but I believe.
No, you're right. It was that. Yep.
Okay. If I remember correctly, I think Brett comes from a state where that is also a thing. So we definitely want to dive into some of those questions that I have. Let's go ahead and have Brett introduce himself, shall we? Yes, I was going to start talking, and we're just going to wait. We're going to start with. I just want
to keep going. Like, look, I have all these questions, but let's let Brett come on. Hi, Brett.
Good morning. Well, I think it's morning. Maybe it's not morning where everybody's at, but good morning where I'm at.
Yeah, you have to be introduced to the whole time vortex that is podcasting.
Oh, so yes, welcome.
Yes. Good morning, afternoon, night, wherever you're at listening.
Exactly.
This could be December. It could be next March. Nobody knows for sure.
Yep.
So.
Right. Spin the wheel and we will see.
Yep.
So, Brett, you were kind of hearing us. You're kind of waiting to kind of do an introduction. Would you mind just kind of cleaning up what Jamie and I was trying to do? Just give our listeners an idea of who you are and some of your background, if you don't mind.
Sure. Yeah. Like you said, I'm a retired police officer, and I am a current member of a school board. And so I have 30 years experience in the law enforcement field. My background kind of revolves around schools. I had almost 15 years as a school resource officer in an elementary, and that was most of my time in the schools, and with some high school and connections. I didn't spend time in the high school, but I actually finished my career. When I tell people that, they're like, "You finished your career in the junior high," and it was quite an eye-opening experience. But anyway, with the experience of the school resource, I worked as a regular patrol officer, detective, and I moved up to the ranks and as a sergeant and a lieutenant. So vast experience in the law enforcement. It's a smaller department. It's nothing like the Chicagos or the New Yorks or anything, but for the town that I was in, it was a community probably about, I think it's about, I'm not sure what the census is, somewhere around 20,000 for the city, but the school district is actually much larger, and it has multiple communities that come together, and it definitely changes the whole dramatic feel of that. But anyway, my other thing is school board. I have been on the school board for about 13 years. You kind of mentioned it off the record that some of the conversations, that lead around COVID with school districts and COVID and stuff, that was a tough time, but it brought a lot of experiences into the school piece. So from the police work into the just interest of getting into the school setting, I guess I wanted to, people were like, okay, isn't police officer enough? And then you go and you get into the school board too. You must like just drama, confrontation. You must like just, what are you thinking? And it's all wrapped around just the public service entity, I think is my kind of thought on that, where I just like giving back and making changes, I guess. And even though I'm one person and I know my views and stuff are not always, 100% correct, but it's like, I always felt like I wanted to give back to that. And, of course, at the time that I got on, our district was in some financial troubles, and, which was like, can we do better? Can I be a piece of that? So that's kind of how I got my interest in the school board. And it's just kind of revolved around the safety piece with the police department. And, as time gone on, I don't know if you want more than that, or if
Nope.
if that was good. But that's kind of just the nutshell of, I guess,
right.
My experience. I don't claim to be an expert. I don't claim to be the,
Well,
I think in the end on this topic, I think we're probably on the same side, all three of us, because it is a touchy topic, and but it's a good topic to talk about that people don't want to talk about, but I think it needs to be talked about.
Yeah, and we agree. And just before we get started, I'm sorry, Jamie, just before we get started, I think it's important to understand that we have you here as somebody who's been in law enforcement and somebody who's acting on a school board. But I think it needs to be said, we're not expecting you to be the voice for all school boards and all law enforcement. We have a lucky situation with us that we get to have someone with your expertise in this conversation, which is very impactful and important to us. But at the same time, I just want to put it out there. I don't know if it needs to be said, but I want to say it, is that you're not meant to represent all law enforcement or all school boards. This is just a moment in time conversation with a unique individual. So thank you for that.
Yeah, very good point. Because we're representing a lot of different states and communities, and these are my opinions. And if anybody knows me that's listening, they know that I have an opinion.
Yeah. Well, and
welcome to the round table, Brett.
Yeah.
Welcome to the round table.
And that's okay. I think, as Malin said it.
Yeah.
No, I think the nice thing that we can come to this conversation, just to jump in, is that I think most of us are on the same side, right? Like, our children's safety is super important to all of us. It's not something, I think the thing that becomes divisive is when we are looking at how do we keep our kids safe, right? The mode that we go, that we use to make sure that our kids are safe, that can be pretty divisive at times. But, as far as, for purposes of this conversation, yes, we want our kids to be safe, and we want our kids to be safe at school. So just to start there, I guess, there are lots of different opinions about what's happening in the world right now. And I am fortunate enough that, and Malin and I have talked about this before, I'm fortunate enough that my children have not been in a situation where there have been major safety concerns for the entire student body like there have in other schools. I think that there have been a couple of times that they've experienced lockdowns because of threats of that. But that's not happened in my community. It also has never happened in any of the communities that it's happened in so far, until it happened, right? And there's nothing special or different about those communities. It can happen anywhere. So just knowing that, I guess, how has your background in law enforcement affected the way that you look at this issue when talking about, the school board that you sit on and the schools that you work with?
Yeah, I think most people think that all cops are 100% gun lovers and gun nuts, if you will. I mean, police officer they're a special breed. I mean, I don't think anybody would argue the fact that police officers are a special breed. I mean, it takes a lot, and that's not disrespecting anybody else that's not a police officer. It's just the fact that sometimes maybe you got a little screw loose if you want to be a cop. I don't know. I mean, it's like with this thing, especially in the world today. But when you think about the gun piece, I mean, it is a very mind-boggling thing, because the concept of, and this kind of goes off topic a little. Well, it's about the same topic, but I mean, when you think about a police officer carries a gun, and whether they go to a theft case or they go to a domestic or it's just a car accident, there's always a gun at that incident. And so people say, well, there's only gun incidents. This is kind of maybe a little, I don't know how do you want to describe it, but in reality, everything we go to now involves a gun. And people don't stop and think about that, because when you look at officer shootings or officer getting attacked, now they have to protect that gun. And that'll make sense more once we get into the conversation, is now you have to protect that gun, even though it might have been an accident. Something happened at that accident. Something happened at that theft case. Now that gun could be involved in it in some case, which can lead into what we're talking about, guns in schools. So the piece of that. So yeah, my mind goes to, it's a very, do you want everybody to have a gun just because they're a teacher, or because they're, because the state says you can? I don't know.
Yeah. Well, and so now I have to jump in, because my body is like all like, I gotta say something here.
I sparked something. I saw you.
You did,
and I loved it. See it, can't you?
I loved it. Yeah. So here's where I'm at. And I just want everyone to know I'm speaking from a parent's point of view in this. I have no other experience, but I think it's a very important one, and it's one that I take very seriously. As I do, I think most parents, would be in the same situation. So here's what I want to say. My personal opinion on guns and, the Second Amendment. I mean, I don't know if you had a chance to listen to it, Brett, or not, but we did an episode a while back with Jamie's brother where we talked about gun control. So to me, I want people to have access to firearms. I want them to be able to use guns respectfully and responsibly. This challenges me on that regard, because the one thing that, you even just said with police officers having guns, they're trained. They have a lot of training. They take a special breed, a special mindset. I have some friends that are police officers, and it's almost like they're living a double life, where they are a relatable just person that I can go and go out and have dinner with. And then when they go to their profession, it's almost like they have to take on a different persona. And that mind switch, I think, how I was recognizing it is a way to kind of compartmentalize what they have to do on the job versus who they are as a person. And when you start talking about bringing that type of mindset into a school, I don't understand that. And it concerns me because I've used this analogy before, and I'm just going to use it here because I'd really like to get your opinion on this to see if I'm off, if I'm not on the right track or if there's something I'm not thinking about. But I don't understand why or how this would work, that you have a teacher who is there to nurture young minds, to grow young minds, to make sure they have a safe space, to make sure that they're learning. How can that same person then in an instant be able to switch that or do a context switch to now I have to pull a firearm to either protect the children from an outside intruder or even protect children from another child? That is something that I am grappling with, and I just can't understand it. Do you have any additional insight, Brett, or do you have an opinion around that? Because that is really at the heart of what I'm struggling with around letting guns into the school system.
Yeah. You bring up good points because, and when I mentioned that the police officer is a different breed, and it is because that's all they're training to do. And you're absolutely right. My wife's a teacher, and we have different methods of how we handle things. She's the nurturing one. I'm the one that, it's punishment. I mean, in a sense, if you can't learn if you can't learn, then you're going to have some kind of a punishment. And I think there's that concept in everything, is there's consequences for everything. But you're right. When you go in and we're on the range and we're working tactical stuff and trying to, all right, where's the bad guy? Detect who's got the gun, who doesn't have a gun. Is it a cell phone? Is it what is it? Your mind's going 100 different directions. And you're right. The teacher, they're doing math 1 minute, they're doing history or whatever their topic is. And then how quick can they flip that switch from being the nurturer to the, yes, I might have to take somebody's life. And don't get me wrong. Police, I try to have that piece where you can go out. You're right. You got the friends that you go out to dinner, you're doing joke and smoke, and then something happens, and you just see them switch. That light switch goes on, and they're a different person. There is no doubt about it. It's almost like the crazy comes out with some calm, because I can't even explain it, but I know exactly what you're talking about. And that's my fear too. Believe it or not, is training. Officers go through, depends on departments. I know we did quarterly trainings just for qualifications, but that doesn't mean we didn't do other, if you were on the TAC team, you were constantly having, whatever it is, training weekly, bi-weekly. It just depends on each department. And then you go out on your own. My wife and I, we were just talking the other day about going to the range just to go and shoot. I have several guns in my house, and I want my family to know how to use them. But they don't have the training that I have. I can go out and I can teach them and get them to that, but not everybody has that mindset to do that. And I keep going back to mindset of the roundtable mindset, by the way.
Yeah.
And I'll throw that out there for you. But not everybody has that mindset of, I'm going to train. And so I think when you get into that point of, can a teacher do it? I think there are some teachers that could do it because they were raised as around guns. Their families, go hunting, or, they're just outdoor people. But there's some people that just cannot do it. They're not willing to take the risk, for one. They're not I don't even know the right term to use, because it's not, I don't want to be offensive to someone, that it's not weakness. It's just the fact that you don't have the ability to take somebody's life.
Right. Well, and I really think that oftentimes our career finds us, right? Like, we don't necessarily, the things that I was planning to do when I was 18 years old are a whole lot different than what I'm actually doing. And the truth of the matter is that are there teachers that are capable? Absolutely. But I also know that there are officers that have struggled to know, is this the time that I pull the weapon or not? And that's with all that training. There was a time, and one thing I think that's interesting, I worked in early childhood, I've said that. What's interesting to me is that when I was working in early childhood, school safety meant a whole lot, something a whole lot different than it does today. School safety to me was making sure the outlet covers were on, making sure that the scissors were not accessible. I mean, all of those, the locked cabinets for the chemicals, that's a whole different mindset to come into a job with, for safety than what we're looking at now. Um, so I totally identify with that. I guess in your experience in the work that you've done, what is the general, I don't know, what have you heard from teachers about this? Is there, what have they expressed to you?
Majority of them don't want it. There's it's not a large conversation. I mean, it's conversation that comes up for the people that want it more. I mean, and there are ones that come up and say, "Hey, we don't. Where are you guys? What's your position?" Not necessarily as me, but as a school board, and um, so it is a mix, but it's a very low percentage of even conversations, and it's not a hot topic, even though it is a hot topic. I think people just um, trust, in some form or fashion with what we have in our school system. We have school resource officers. And I know as long as I'm going to be on the school board, however long the voters allow me to stay on, um, that's the direction that I want to go. I mean, we can do private security, and that's one of the things from the state that I'm in is our governor has passed the the legislation as well. They passed the legislation, and some of it doesn't make sense, and it's almost they want you to feel good about it, and this is where I I don't get I try to stay non-political in the school board, and which has been lately hard to do because of, let's just go back. COVID was the turning point where school districts really turned political. This can be a political one of those things. It's not going to be I think to the extent of what COVID was political, but I think it can definitely turn political because of both sides' views. But yeah, when you talk about, who talks and who's talking about it, who's not. I mean, both sides are, but low numbers. And I think they just trust in what we have. And I don't know how all the other school districts are doing it. I know some, I'll take the biggest district in our state. They've opted out of what the governor had wanted. And it's anything, 8,000 students or more must have school resource officers in their school. But they can opt out if they have their own security. Now, the piece of that it just is mind-boggling to me is like, there's not too many schools in my state that have 8,000 students. So the requirements are very low. I mean, it's like, how can you even sit here and say, we're only going to require the largest school districts to have SROs. The lower school districts don't. But it comes to funding. How can some of these lower school districts have security if they can't have the funding?
Is it just funding, or is it also, I mean, that feels a little political to me too, that the governor gets to say, hey, see what we passed here, but the effect is so tiny, but it sure makes a big splash on the newspapers.
Yeah, like our school district is choosing to have SROs in there, and we're willing to take that expense. But that's a general fund expense. That's nothing that the state's giving us extra money for. But they want to have these big ideas of, we're into school safety, but you're going to have to take that away from the regular education piece. And that's where my mind starts going, wait a minute, this is not. And I know that might be a little off topic, and I didn't mean to switch it there, but funding plays a big part in what school district can do for safety too. And if you don't want teachers to have guns, you have to have an alternative. And I think some of the smaller school districts that we're starting to see that talk about it around the countries, that's an alternative because I don't have to really pay anybody else to be the security. I can have that teacher be the security officer as well too. Right, wrong, or indifferent. That's just kind of how I think. And that's, again, my opinion. That is nothing set in, policy or procedure for anybody, and I may be way off kilter on that, but that's kind of how I see it.
Well, and we've been talking, we're kind of circling the drain here on this. One of the things that keeps nagging at me is, and this is a question that I need to go and ask my own school board, and I need to get a little bit more educated. But where does the parent's voice come in all of this? There's a lot of times where, as a parent, I send my kid to a school district, and I believe that they are going into the safest environment that school can provide them. And they're doing what they can to keep them safe. They're doing what they can to educate my child. They're loving on my kid as much as they can while they're there. I have the highest respect for education and for the teachers. I just want to put that out there. I think the environment that they're in is something that's lacking. We'll talk about that another time. But this is the first time a topic came to me, Brett, where I'm like, I feel like I don't really have a voice to be able to make a difference to help shape the environment that my child is going into. And this is definitely one of the first times that this is a type of a conversation where I feel like if my school district would then allow to have guns to come in, where's my voice to stop that? Or what are my options without completely uprooting my child and moving them to a new school district, or do a homeschool or send them to a private school? I really feel as a parent, this specific topic, my hands are kind of tied, and I don't really enjoy that. So can you help me understand, even from your experience on a school board, is there something that a parent can do, can be part of? How do parents get their voices heard?
Yeah, I think just talking to your school board representatives and just telling them, it doesn't have to be in the public forum at the meetings. I think you just email them, give them a phone call, and just say, hey, I want to know what are our alternatives. I know this is going on in our state or our city, and right, wrong, or indifferent. Again, if you express that, it's not always the squeaky wheel gets the grease, but in some cases, if people come out, and that's the thing, is the people, sometimes they sit silent and you don't hear that. And you kind of just go off of, I know as me being on the school board, is I'm elected to be that representative, but my opinions are sometimes different than some of the, the stakeholders and the voters out there. And so until I hear from them, I have to be able to get that other perspective from them as far as what their thoughts are. Now, that may not change my thought on it, but at least they're talking to me. And it's nowadays, it just seems like the only time people do talk is when you have a really, really hot topic. And otherwise, and that's kind of what I meant, people feel comfortable in some of the decisions that the school boards make, is that until that hot topic comes up, they don't talk about it because they get in a comfort zone. Now, what I'm hearing you say is you're not very comfortable with it. Not that you're not comfortable with your school board, you're just not comfortable with the topic. So I would definitely say get on your phone, email, make sure you get your voice heard, and just share with other parents to tell them too. It doesn't have to be a huge campaign of like stop guns in school or whatever, but it's more of like, what is the piece that you want? Do you not like not you specifically, but does this school district not want any guns in the school? No SROs, no private security, no teachers. Because I know in my opinion, I think having some, like the SROs in there that are trained and that have that background, that's a must nowadays. And it's terrible to say it's a must nowadays, because you shouldn't have to have those at all in a school. And so from a police officer, I would much rather not have to do that, because it changes, that goes into another conversation too to think about, is now you have a police officer in a school enforcing laws when should they really happen to be in school to enforce laws when that's a learning environment? Does that even make sense?
It does. And I kind of want to put a pin in that because I have a couple other questions around the gun aspect of it that I'd like to pick your brain on. But I think it is important in this conversation when we're talking about kids' safety in schools to go back and say, how do we enforce safety among even the students themselves? And so what I heard you say is, if we don't have those individuals, those resources, and let's say they were completely removed, well, then how do the teachers and the faculty, how would they maintain that safety even among students? Because the school district that I'm in, there's incidents, and there's incidents that happen all the time. I don't think we're unique, right? I don't know what happens in other states or other school districts, but I can't believe that our school district is the only one. But we do have a resource officer. And if that resource officer wasn't there, who would it be left up to? Would it be left up to the students to be self-governing? Well, we're talking about kids in a variety of different ages and states of mind. And then if it's left up to the faculty, I know, for instance, there's several schools, school buildings that my kids have gone to and are in currently and will be going to, where the staff is spread so thin to just do their day-to-day job, their normal job. And then you want to add that on top of it. It's a complex problem that just keeps compounding. But I do want to come back to that. But I do want to finish up on the gun thing for just a second. So in my mind, and I try to be a logical, rational thinker, and in my mind, let's say there's a progression to guns. To me, there are things within the school districts that they should be doing or implementing that would lead us to trying to find smaller, less expensive ways to solve the problem without going from nothing to now every faculty is armed in the school and we have it all taken care of. Some of the things that come to mind, and I just want to get your opinion again, but I'm sure some school districts have these, but for mine, I'm just going to speak openly. Like having clear backpacks, that could help reduce the ability for someone to carry a weapon with them. Also, metal detectors. I often thought if there was metal detectors that would be at the doors where kids would come in and out, would that be able to help you identify weapons that they're trying to bring in and remove them from them without having to arm everybody in the school? It's things like that. Those are measures to me in my mind that are there to reduce and remove the ability for kids to even have weapons, not just let's make everybody have a weapon in case a kid brings one in.
Before we move forward too much, I would also add trained mental health services available to students that need it. I would also add maybe some better social work to this. You know what I mean? I think that because it is a multifaceted problem, it's not just the guns, right? It's also what's driving that. So I just wanted to interject that before we move forward.
Well, I'm more than happy to come back and talk about mental health pieces of it too, because I think that's there is a component that goes along with that. So you kind of talked about metal detectors and clear backpacks, and those are, I like the clear backpack idea because you can kind of see in there some of the problems that we have with general security. I mean, I think when you look back on, in our district, for example, we really started hitting hard, very hard. Our district has always been pretty good about general security, making sure doors aren't propped open and those type of things. And, who's coming into school and when. You look back, and when schools were designed, schools were supposed to be inviting. They weren't supposed to be fortresses. A parent should be able to come in and go when they please. Unfortunately, we got into a society situation where now we have to lock our schools down. They have become fortresses. Almost, some people will say it's almost like a prison because it's got tighter security than they're used to. And when you talk about parents having a say or control over things, it has taken a little bit of a piece away from, because school districts are going to locked doors, and then you have to push, you have a system where you push the button, the receptionist responds to you, and then they decide, are you friend or foe? Then you're allowed to come into the next portal. You step into the next Twilight Zone or whatever you want to call it. And then they kind of check you out again, before you get to actually come into the building. And that's, when you look at it, that's sad. That's a sad society that we have to live in, because we're now questioning everybody that comes through the doors of a school. So metal detectors, again, everything comes back to funding. I mean, it doesn't make a difference what you do in the school. If it's not an educational piece, it comes back to funding. And these are no excuses. These are just, I guess in my opinion, just hard facts, which is good conversations to have, because when you look at a metal detector, depending on what brand you get, you can get false readings out of it. And what I mean by false readings is it might pick up the metal, but, you take just different pieces of metal that you might have, especially as you get into older kids, no offense, underwire bras. You get belt buckles. You get buckles of belts of kids that come to school, buckles on shoes. Personnel, how many people how big is the school district? How many people do you have to stand there and monitor the kids coming through? Corporate people, and this is a topic that is very valid. People want their children safe. People want to be safe. Teachers want to be safe. Everybody wants to be safe. But people talk to me and they say, well, a corporation does this. Well, and you can't go inside my work without having a name tag, or you can't go in there without being metal detected, the way wanted by the security officer at the door. But when you're looking at districts that are in large sizes, those kids come in, when you jump off the bus, you have 77 passenger buses. And some of them, depending on the school district, you might have 77 times 4 people coming into your building at once. And how long does that take? How many false readings are you get? Now, once you get a reading, what are you going to do about that reading? Because, as you know, you're not going to strip search every student that comes through there. Matter of fact, you're not going to strip search one student coming through there. So how dig can a person dig, in a sense? I mean,
Okay, so I know this is like rabbit trail galore, because I don't know how else to say this question, because it's very
you
sensitive.
just say it.
I know. But if there is somebody, and I understand their age, and we're talking about kids, but if there is somebody who's suspect of bringing something into the school, let's just take the moment we just said, well, we're not going to strip searching. That just sounds really aggressive. But pulling a child aside to say, okay, we need to look in your pockets, or you need to pull in what's in your pocket, like whatever the area is saying, why couldn't this be like a TSA moment where it says, you know what, we are going to do a check if it comes through, there's a reading there. Again, I'm not talking about the staff and stuff, but just the initial reaction is like, well, why couldn't we do stuff like that? Why is it so? Is it because it's a legal issue? Is it because they're minors? Like, is it because you need the parents there in order to be able to address those types of things? That's where my brain goes. I don't know the law. I just know that if it's a matter of, instead of arming the entire school versus putting in, 5 extra faculty members around a couple different metal detectors to kind of bring kids through them and pull a kid aside to just do a little pat down, I would be okay with that, even if that was one of my kids that got pulled aside and had a pat down, just for the safety of themselves and everybody else. Can you expand upon that? Like, what am I missing there?
That's a loaded question, but it's a good question. And I'm trying to dig deep down in my mind. So you get a student that comes in and you get a reading. You're going to have reasonable suspicion that there's something dangerous in there. And school districts do have, and even police officers have that, if something has to happen, they can search you. But I mean, you got to look at your, search and seizure laws. Can you, so what the teachers can do or administrations can do is going to be a little bit different than police. So I guess I wasn't ready for that question. So I guess I didn't really think about it, but it is a good one. You can probably pull that person aside, but I guess to my point is, if you have those metal detectors going off, how many people are you going to pull aside? And again, it takes time. And I guess not to go around your question, because I don't really have the answer that I want to give, because I could give you my opinion of it, but legally it may not be the right, for depending on each state too. So I think the piece of it is going to be just the reasonable suspicion. If there's reasonable suspicion that you think somebody has a gun in there or a weapon, and it's not that underwire bra or a belt buckle, who's trained in making those decisions as well? And because you could probably be pulling people in consistently, and then be like, okay, well, how far do you go? Now, administrators and school district staff can probably, they can go take you in there and they say, hey, empty your pockets, take your shoes off. We've done that before when I was an SRO, where you believe they had a vape on them, let's say, or they were suspected of smoking marijuana. You were able to smell that on them, and you say, hey, do you have any other vapes on you? So you have them pull their pockets out, take their shoes off, take their socks off, stretch their arms up. They had a sweatshirt off, you'd have them take the sweatshirt off and whatever. But you would never get to the point of having them take clothes off or giving them a pat down again. I mean, does that kind of make a little sense?
It does. And I appreciate your answer, because it's honest, Brett. And it's one that I don't think I think it was unfair for me to say, do you have an opinion is one thing, but by state and by law, I mean, you touched on a lot of things. There's a lot of factors go in there. I guess I was just looking for a general, like, why is it that it seems like the school district, and specifically, is handcuffed? And again, I'm not saying that they should be able to take billy clubs and just whack kids across the head when they're like, hey, you're stepped out of line, whack. But it just feels like there's a lot of things that the school districts are handcuffed when doing. And when you're talking about the safety of the kids and even of themselves, right? Like, there might be some kids that are, rowdier than others, but really we're talking about the safety of all of the school kids. And it's like, there's, from my opinion, my school district, there's faculty that I've witnessed, there's schools that I've witnessed that seem like they are just handcuffed and cannot do a proper job to ensure safety in the school because of regulations or policies or laws or what have you. And it makes me almost want to ask the question, everything we've talked about, is there really a solution that we can come to, or is it just the fact that we have to live with a certain level of unsafety in our schools because of the environment that the schools are?
Well, no, valid point. And I think I might have taken your question a little bit differently, but good points either way. And to answer that piece of it I think it all comes down as how schools can discipline children and support from parents. When, and you get tired of hearing this, but when I went to school,
back in my day,
when I went to school, yes, I walked uphill both ways to school through sleet, snow, and like a post office worker, But if you think about it, though, when generations are changing, definitely. I mean, my grandparents and great grandparents probably went to, one room schoolhouses and, had the expectations were, you go to school, you're going to listen to your teacher, you're not going to backtalk, you're not going to mouth off, you're going to do what it is, or it's going to be worse if you don't when you get home. Don't worry about what they're going to do to you at school. You better worry about what's going to happen when you get home. And now there's no fear. There's no fear of what's going to happen with anything, because you can't talk to my child that way. You can't do this to my child. You can't do this to my child. Well, and I'm not sitting here saying that you have to beat them with a yardstick, You don't have to put hands on kids to get attention. But maybe sometimes, I guess before I get into that is, we need parents to step up and be parents. They're expecting the schools to raise their kids. Now, not everybody. I'll make sure I clarify this. It's a very low percentage of what I'm talking about, because I think and I won't even put a percentage on it, but there's a very high percentage of families out there that are still a traditional family, if you will, that have values of you're going to obey the laws, you're going to follow the rules, even if you don't like them. You're going to follow them, and you're going to do what's expected of you. You're going to be respectful. We go back to the pillars, the character pillars. I mean, as probably a good example for me is every one of those have, and don't ask me to mention all of them, but I can tell you I know what they are just by being a good human. Being respectful, not stealing, it's all one big piece of, what a good human being is. Everybody knows what a good human being. But when you go in there and you say, I'm not going to follow your rules, this is again off another topic, but cell phones in schools, which may be another episode down the line. But you say, well, you can't have cell phones in schools. Well, that just drives parents crazy. Well, I need to be able to get a hold of my child. Okay, well, what do you really need to get a hold of your child for every day? I mean, I get it. And when we're talking about school safety, I mean, if something were to go down, absolutely you want to get a hold of your child. You want to have that connection. As my 3 kids, that went through the school district, 2 of them were very young when cell phones were first even came out, so they didn't have the luxury of having this little metal device hooked to their hands 24/7. My youngest, he is one of those kids that he has a phone, and not a phone, an iPod thing that you can text him on. He's got a Apple Watch. He's got, this, that, and the other for doing lessons on. I mean, computers, technology is all a big piece of it. But anyway,
I got to say, you're kind of stepping on my toes here, Brett. And
sorry.
No, I love it because it challenges me, because I'm the first person, our school district has just implemented, and I think it's not only just my school district that my kids are in, but I think it's the surrounding areas, because I'm also in a metropolitan area, and they all seem to be adopting a policy now where cell phones are not allowed in schools. And there's a part of me that I'm like, well, wait a minute, I need to be able to get a hold of my kid. Why? Because I'm spoiled. So I'm going to answer you from a parent's point of view, because I'm spoiled. Because at one point in time, I had to contact the school to get a hold of my child. And now, because of cell phones and technology, I don't need to go through the school anymore. I can have direct access to my kid. And now I'm spoiled. And to remove that from me caused a little bit of pain. I can live with that. The one element, though, as we continue to talk about safety, you talk about arming staff with guns. You armed kids with, now I understand they're not going to use them responsibly and respectfully all the time, so I'm not trying to go that route. But at the same time, you talk about arming an entire school building full of people who have access to call 911 at a drop of a hat, or somebody needs to get called for help. Suddenly you're reducing that pool down to say, okay, not everybody's going to have access. Now, I know the school district that I'm in it's not that they can't have them in the building. It's just they can't be on them. So there is a little bit of a gray area. So, I can still, my kids still have access to that. But that just reminded me when you were talking, ouch, first, because you were on my toes. And 2, from a safety perspective, though, I mean, what do you think about that? If it's reducing the pool of people who could call for help in case there is an issue? To me, that seems like that might be a bigger issue as a parent than just me not being able to reach my kid without going through the school.
Yeah, no. And those are valid points as a parent, because like I said, I want to be able to, if something were to happen, I want to know my child is safe. Where are you at? What's going on there? No doubt about it. Some of the safety concerns, though, that we have with that, becomes, again, man, this is dragging us into a lot of different topics here. Holy cow. Social media pieces of it. When you get into issues outside of school, now become school issues because that cell phone's in the hands of those children. And, if it's an incident that, let's just take, we're still close to the back summertime here. Issues going on during the summer, and this person didn't get along. Now they're back at school. Guess what? Now it becomes the school issue because they're in the school and the phones are there and there's non-stop contact. You have not relieved that person, whoever it is. Don't care what side it is. That person can't get a reprieve. There's no safe space for this student. I'll just say it's the victim. Whoever the victim is in that situation, that person does not have a safe space now because they go to school, which is supposed to be a safe space, but yet the activity still happens. And it's because of sometimes phones and safety. So phones also, when an incident's happening, may cause people to say things that actually is not true. Let's take a threat, for example. Somebody says there's a threat in the school, and next thing you know, you got kids texting other people saying, "Oh, I just heard gunshots in the school," or "I've seen this," or you name it. I mean, just the false things that come out of kids' minds sometimes is just unbelievable. So that does pose a safety risk. If there's a fight in a school, next thing you know, that thing's posted all over social media. Those are safety things for me, I guess. I mean, and there's probably a few more in my mind that I'm just not thinking of right now. But so if we could find a happy medium of, and I think some school policies, obviously are, I think everything's just a guideline. I mean, I think if you sit here and said that this is a solid, you have to do this, I think there are exceptions to the rules of everything. And I think if we can figure out what that is, I don't know if we ever will, because I want parents to have contacts with their kids. I want parents, hey, don't forget I'm picking you up at 3:00, because you're right. It's convenience. We've allowed ourselves to have that convenience of everything now. I can't call that receptionist at the school and say, "Hey, can you remind my son or daughter that you have a dentist appointment at 1, and that I will be there, or I'm running late." You get the direct text, "Hey, I'm running 15 minutes late. I'm not going to be right there, but still meet me out front."
Well, and on the other side of that too, and cell phones has been kind of a dichotomy for me anyway, because I'm like, my goodness, I am a functioning, well-rounded adult, and I did not have a cell phone for my parents to micromanage everything I did, monitor everything I did, or get a hold of me at any given moment, right? And I am spoiled rotten because I have access to my children anytime I want to by just doing those things, right? But I think what has been interesting about the cell phone thing to me is this, like, we started with this. I had a pager in high school.
Yes.
I was too young for pagers. Sorry,
No,
Jamie's
you
older than
weren't.
I
I just
Did you
thought I
ever
was
get-
way too cool.
Did you ever get the 911 text or on your pager, and that was the call home immediately? Or
Oh, we had a code. I think I probably got a grand total of 12 pages on my pager the whole time I had it, but I had a pager because I thought it was cool. But, I wasn't allowed to have my pager in class. It had to go, whatever. And then we had this whole swing back to, yep, everybody can have their cell phones whenever they want them. I was shocked at how much freedom my kids have with their cell phones at school. And now we're kind of swinging back the other direction. I don't know. I guess I see how that can really play into school safety, But again, I also see how, and maybe this is just my lens. I'll be super transparent and tell you that maybe it's just my lens, but I see how those things also interweave with mental health, and how intricately together mental health and safety seem to be attached right now. That, on some level, we are having some mental health crisis in this country as far as accessing services and, some of those kind of things. So, you said you could speak to some of that. And I guess I just kind of wanted to touch back on that and say, what kind of role do you see mental health playing in the safety of our students in schools now? And do you have any thoughts about what needs to be different so that it is better?
Yeah. Well, I guess I'll take us back to the, it kind of falls back on the Second Amendment to kind of start, and I'll get into what I guess my mind's saying here. When you look at the Second Amendment, everybody, has the right to bear firearms, or to the right, and I always, people bring that up and they're like, well, when that was brought forth in our nation, I mean, there was different circumstances where everybody needed a gun and wanted a gun because they were protection of certain things. I won't get in completely that stuff. But when you look at now, with so much mental health pieces, that I just don't believe everybody should be carrying a gun. For one, we go back to the training piece. I think if you have proper training, I mean, they have background checks and they do all that stuff, but how far can you really dig into somebody's mental health on an application? We're talking muskets versus, 17 round magazine, guns, and even higher, some even go up to 22, 20, 30. I don't know. I mean, again, I've got guns, but I don't have a lot of guns. And this is where I want to respect everybody's right to carry that gun, but I want to dissect into that person a little bit more to make sure that, okay, what is your mental health well-being? Because if you're a person that's not feeling the best and you've got some mental health issues, what's the purpose of you buying the gun? Mm-hmm. And again, you get into suicide and all that stuff. That's completely, again, this has been good conversations. I mean, a lot of stuff. Wow. But when you really think about it, that's what I'd want to do is I'd like to figure out, all right, can we go back into someone's psychiatric records, to find out before they carry a gun? Because I don't want to stop you from having a gun if you want to have a gun. But by gosh, I don't want you carrying a gun just because you think it's a right. I mean, it is a right, but is it really a right? I mean, somebody may not want you to have a gun. I know I don't want anybody out there that's going to have it. But as far as like when we go into the school systems, again, everybody has what is their background? What's their story? And we have cell phones. Going back into the cell phones, we have cell phones that are in everybody's hands. I'm going to kind of give you a book that around our area. It's called The Anxious Generation, and it's how the great rewiring of childhood is causing an epidemic of mental illness. I'll repeat that. The Anxious Generation. It's by Jonathan Haidt, Haidt. And I even got a copy of it, and I'm slowly going through it and reading it. And it talks, really, it's a lot of it is about what's going on with those cell phones and our mental health. So I kind of tied a lot of things in there because when you look at the beginning and you take it in there, now you bring guns into schools where our generation, there's more mental health crisis than there ever has been. Some states, I really won't touch that with a 10-foot pole, but every state's different on how they're treating mental health. And I think if you look around the country, it's not on the top of everybody's radar. I don't think they're making it a priority like they should. And so giving everybody a right to carry a gun, putting phones in everybody's hands that is all their focus is on. They don't know how to separate life from fact from fiction. We have everything at the now. We can't, our kids are having trouble relationship wise, being able to be told no.
I was going to say, except the word no.
Being rejected. Yeah, being rejected from our peers, whether it's a boyfriend, girlfriend, or whether it's just a playground, football game or dancing, whatever the girls do at playgrounds. But what they usually stand in a circle and kind of talk. I don't know, at least when I was in school. I mean, and the boys are out running around being crazy and bouncing off walls and playing football, and girls are kind of on the jungle gym and doing that. But but I don't know. It just, the phone is causing a lot of mental illness. And I think if the objective is if you take that phone out of everybody's hands, even me, I find myself on social media more than I ever wanted to be, because I'm always looking for that information. I'm always looking for the latest and great. What's the newest thing out there? Hey, I'll give you an example of needing something now. My wife would probably slap me in the back of the head if she heard me telling this story, but she hurt her knee, and she had to stay home from work for a few days while after surgery. And of course I had to work, and there really wasn't anybody here to kind of wait on her. And she could, with medical science that is today, you can get up and they have you up moving around pretty quickly. So she was able to move around a little bit, but just not fast. And it took her a little bit. Well, she got hungry, so she ordered Amazon. She got on the Amazon and she ordered chocolate peanuts. Okay. So I come home and I'm looking on the table and I'm, hey, how's your day? Do you need anything? And she goes, no, I'm fine. And I look on the table and I'm like, where'd these chocolate peanuts come from? And she goes, because I thought she got them out of the closet, because I'm like, oh, you walked all the way to the closet. She goes, no, I ordered them on Amazon. I'm like, one package of chocolate peanuts that she ordered. I mean,
I was going to say DoorDash. That's all we have to say is DoorDash. Like the top $2 cheeseburger turns into $14 on DoorDash because you have to have it now.
And that's we've created that environment, though. We've created that society where we don't have to wait anymore. Right? Yep. Like everything is now. If I have a craving, I watch a show and I have to watch a commercial, even if it's 30 seconds, how dare they? I can just skip through it now. I don't even have to see them.
Yeah.
Oh God.
So I can kind of understand where, you translate that into our kids, into the school system, and you have teachers. Learning is not instant. Learning takes time. Learning takes practice. Learning takes repetition. Learning takes a structured environment. And if you go from a society where everything is now, everything is instant, everything is hurry up and give it to me, back into an environment where it's naturally slower because it takes time to take in these concepts, to learn them and to apply them, I can understand where there's friction. I don't think that's the only place that there's friction, but that's how I try to kind of relate them back to each other. So you have two worlds colliding with each other, not to mention the one, Brett, that I really resonate very much with is that, and we've talked about this in other episodes, our kids don't have downtime anymore, because even when they're not doing, things at school or doing things around the house, they're constantly plugged in to their friends and classmates and society. They never get a break. They never get to be turned off and just have time to be quiet and still and enjoy just their own company from time to time.
Not just our kids, us too. I mean, truthfully, I don't ever have to be disconnected if I don't want to be.
Well, how many kids, and again, this is going to take us back to when I was a kid. When I was a kid, I played Hot Wheels. I loved laying down on the floor and playing Hot Wheels, and just my imagination would go endless. I would dream I was a truck driver. I would dream I was a police officer. I would dream I had these little things that they set up, and it was like a little city, and it had a car wash in it, and you could run the car through the car wash. We played we were outdoors all the time, riding our bikes. And you're right. Kids nowadays and that's where that phone, I think, plays into mental illness. Mm-hmm. Where mental illness is caused by everything. It's not always caused by a phone. I mean, it's caused by trauma. It's caused by, everything that anything can cause trauma. But I think what we're really getting is where these phones, our kids are just locked into the phone, and they're not spending any time communicating with each other. My youngest, well, even my oldest, they had the Matchbox. I gave them my collection of Matchbox cars and tried to. But as they got, like I said, my oldest, he didn't have the cell phone, like my youngest does. I mean, he's constantly got that. He didn't have the iPods. He didn't have the Surfaces and whatever else, the other fancy names for all these equipment. What am I trying to say? The phones, the tablets. Anyway,
technology.
Yeah, there you go. Oh, simple word, technology. Thank you.
Simple word.
Simple word. Multifaceted.
And so that book that I told, The Anxious Generation, I think, what that covers is trying to get people's minds back to, Malin, you said it, where, teaching is not, I can't remember the exact thing. It's not a quick process.
It's not instantaneous.
It's not instantaneous, and it takes time. And I think if you can take the phones out of the kids' hands, they learn to have patience. They'll learn to listen. Their mind will be focused on something that's going on right in front of them instead of what's happening over, in their best friend's house or whatever they're looking at on social media. So I think that piece of the mental illness, if you get an opportunity to read that book, I mean, I haven't dug too deep into it yet, but it's been very interesting.
Yeah, you're the second recommendation I've had for that book specifically. So it's now on my Amazon list for sure. So,
and we'll also just, since you referenced it, Brett, we'll go ahead and find a link to it somewhere. So people that are listening and want to look at it, they'll see a link in our show notes that can take them to them. I have one other thing, and I'm looking at the time, and I know we're kind of going along here. I so appreciate, and there's probably 10 things we've already talked about that I'd love to have some more time with you. But one of the questions as a parent around kids' safety is, and I don't know how to pose. It's a very open-ended question, and it's Jamie. Again, you're a parent too. You've been through the school district. I'm just asking this because I don't know how else to put it, to articulate it, or even what it means. But this is a kind of a feeling and an experience that I've had with my kids, and I've seen it firsthand happen to them. But what do we do? Like, we've talked a lot about, external forces coming into the school, and how do we keep our kids safe? Well, how do we keep our kids safe when I'm going to say the enemy, air quotes, is in the classroom with them? Like, how do you safeguard children and create an environment that's safe when we let the same people into the school building, into the same classes that will hurt them as the kids themselves? And I know that's a very open-ended question, but that's something that I'm struggling with. Like, all the measures we've talked about is about keeping people from coming in and hurting the kids. But what do we do to minimize or reduce or eliminate them hurting themselves and each other?
I guess, can you expand a little bit more on that? When you're talking like the bullying,
I have a long history with bullying. So to me, bullying is not on the top of my list, but I can understand that it's there. Jamie, quit smirking. I'm thinking of when there's a kid who disrupts a classroom because for a variety of incidents, and they use maybe a pencil and they start threatening other kids or the teacher, and the other children's environment has to be altered or impacted because they have to do what they can to minimize that without putting their hands on the kid. This is just one of many examples, but this is kind of what I'm talking about. there's no measures in place, nor would I want there to be one that says that child, whatever issues or mental issues or bad day they're having, doesn't make them not able to go to the same school and get the same education as my children. But yet at the same time, they are now impacting or potentially hurting other kids, including my own, in that environment. And that's hard, because I think if you look across other societies and other environments, you talk about work, you talk about prison, like all of these different things, there's ways that you can keep the, I'll say, bad people from the good people. But in school, in my mind, and I believe this, all kids are good. They just do sometimes stupid things, or sometimes they do bad things. Well, if that's the environment, I can only imagine how difficult it would be to keep that environment safe when the people that are causing the harm are the same ones we're trying to safeguard. Does that make
Yeah.
sense, Brett? Do you see where I'm coming?
Yeah. It's kind of more of the behavioral students, the disruptions, and that is a good topic, because I mean, teachers and teacher associates, all the people that work in a school feel that their hands are tied when it comes to some of those things, because you're right. They don't want to be they would rather, and I use this loosely, but it seems like it comes down to legislation. Legislation is the biggest key of what happens in the school district. And when the legislature puts their hands in something and says, well, you can't do this, you can't do that, every interpretation, I mean, they look at the intent of how the law was. How did you plan on, when you were sitting in your committees and this law came together, what was the intent of this law? Well, then that changes to, well, here, and here, and it goes up, and it's like, okay, well, that means we can't put our hands on a kid. No matter what, we can't put our hands on a kid. And in actuality, that's not factual. Dependent on each state. If a student's standing there with a pair of scissors or a pencil and using it in a threatening manner, those staff members have a right to defend themselves just like anybody else would in the world. You have that right to, stop that threat. The problem comes is when it's just when a student, whether they have some kind of restrictions on them. I won't get into specific because I don't know which states or what they have would mean. I can throw out something and they'd be like, what did you just say? But anyway, so like the state I have in, they have restrictions, and basically it's like special education things where
like educational plans and things for specific
yes, that's probably
students.
the best way to put it. Yeah. We call them different things, but if I said them, it would probably pinpoint exactly where I'm at, and then it wouldn't make sense to the others. So, but yeah, they have the plans that say, well, this student has to do this or can't do this and can't do that. Well, let's say it's a behavioral student that gets in there and disrupts the class. And my wife has had several of those where they've flipped desks over, they've thrown things, and it's kind of like, now that disrupts everybody. And they do treat that student a little bit different. You're not going to just go up and grab that student by the arm and pull them out, even though you would think that would be the answer. You want to stop. Now, if it's and this is kind of where it gets really that fine line is, are they being disruptive or are they being threatening? I guess that's kind of where I look at it is. If they're being threatening, that's going to, in my opinion, that is going to be treated a little bit differently. And I think you have to put that to a stop. The behavioral piece of it is, the question's always going to come up is, does that student know what they're doing at that moment? Is this part of their plan? Is this something that is being worked on, and how do they continue working on it? So I think all those things in place have a play in that. And so I don't really have a good answer on a solution to it, other than I do think we need to get back to some legislation to allow teachers to do a little bit more, to have a little more control of that, instead of just saying, okay, Johnny or Sally, and I have no offense to any Johnnies or Sallys out there, or Bretts, I'll use my name there. Okay, Brett, calm down now, calm down. And then it's not calming down. It's not calming down. And at that point, you should be able to direct that student out, but the fear is that if the teachers put their hands on a student, that they're going to be sued, and most likely probably would be sued because, as I went into earlier, is there's no parental support. The parents say, do not do that to my kid. You will not do that to my child. You will not do this and you not do that. So the fear comes into the teachers' minds of that if I ever put my hands on a kid, I'm going to be sued. I'm going to lose my job. It's not worth it, blah, blah, blah. And I don't mean blah, blah, blah in a bad way. I mean blah, blah, blah because the legislature is just throwing a bunch of blah, blah, blah out there that sometimes it means nothing. It's good. It's like we were talking the safety piece earlier. You can't just put legislation out there just to make someone feel happy or feel good. It has to have some substance to it. And I don't know the answers to that. I mean, I wish, but if the legislature would really dive deep down into some of the things instead of some of the things that they are talking about and doing, and talk about protecting our teachers and making sure that everybody in that classroom is protected. And again, I say that cautiously because you don't want to get into the segregation pieces of it. You don't want, special education families, whether it's behaviors or anything else, have a right to an education and have a right to be in that classroom to participate just like everybody else.
Well, and just to add a layer of perspective, I hear where you're coming from. I have a parent who is an educator. I also see a shift in how, like, the attitudes my parents had about school was, what are you going to do, young lady, to make this better? And not, what are you, teacher, going to do to make sure my kid succeeds? There was a very different shift. There's a very different focus in what I see with my kids' peers in education now. I guess I would also just like to, I was a foster parent for a lot of years. I parented some of those kids. I cared very deeply and did everything I could to support some of those kids, those behavior kids, I guess, with air quotes. And it's a difficult situation to be in, because, at least from my point of view, there was nothing. I didn't do anything to cause it. And sometimes that's the case. Sometimes there's no root cause for it, right? It's not bad parenting. It is just what it is. And I don't have any solutions, right? So it's a whole difficult, I think, topic, because from a school point of view, I can see that. From a parenting point of view, I can see that. And from a child's point of view, I wonder if that's a little different too. You know what I mean? And so, I appreciate the idea that I guess I always feel like anytime we talk about school safety, especially school safety with other students, there's only, and I hope most people have some understanding that there's only so much the school can do, right? There's only so much that the school is equipped with to be able to deal with these different things. And how do we look at the environment? How do we look at, and it's different. It's going to be different in, inner city Omaha or Chicago than it's going to be in rural, tiny Wyoming, right? But how do we make sure that our students have access to all the tools and all of the services that they might need to be successful? And that's kind of, I think that's, for me, that's the end of it. Like, how do we make sure that they have the tools and the access to what they need to be successful? But
add to that, Jamie, really quick. I think an element that even in your well said explanation that you just ran through, I think part of the conversation that we need to start having is also when you talk about environment, you have students and you have parents of students who don't deal with behavioral issues, that look at those as it's a foreign entity. And I'm gonna put myself in that. I don't have children that act out in ways that we've been talking about. and I am removed, it is very easy, if I do not safeguard myself, it is very easy to say that is unfair to my child. They are doing this to my child. Something needs needs to take place so that stops happening to my child. Well, I lack the ability to really understand what is going on over on that side of the table or the equation, because I don't experience that. And I think when we talk about behavioral things in schools, we have to bring together the people that do suffer, the things that you just talked about. And we need to bring together the individuals that don't have it, so there can be some mutual understanding to say, hey, this child, this parent may not be doing it to you on purpose. They may not even be doing it to themselves. And I think when we understand those pieces together, to me, the safety piece comes from having everybody, the ones that directly have those ties to those behavioral issues and the ones that don't, can come together and say, here's a base understanding. How do we make it safe for everybody? Because right now, I know I'm not part of conversations. And I'm not saying I need to know individual learning plans for every child. That's not what I'm saying. But as a parent of children that do not have behavioral issues, I am so far removed from the policies, from the safety measures, from what's even available, to even sometimes what's happening within the classrooms, that there's sometimes there is a behavioral issue that happens that I never hear about unless my child will say in passing, oh, so and so picked up a shoe and threw it at another kid's head. Like, so I just wanted to add that, because from me, there's a level of, I want to get in there. I want to be a team player, but I'm so far removed from it. And I think that's also a missing link, is all I'm trying to say.
There's something to be said too about the about the difficult situation that puts the other students in the classroom in too. There is some level of trauma to know that, I'll just use Brett's name, little Brett. Little
Poor
Brett
little
was,
Brett.
You did know, you knew me as a kid, didn't you?
Little Brett was told no and decided to flip his desk, and his stuff went all over me. That raises the level of anxiety and the fight or flight or freeze and the hypervigilance and all of those kind of things. It really can affect the rest of the classroom too. And, I hope we can, because of the polarized environment, because school boards have suddenly become political when it wasn't that way when we were back in my day, right? I really hope we can get to a space where we're, as a community, we can look at our schools and just try and do the best we can for all of our students, and not make it so like, I'm a Second Amendment person, and I think we need guns in schools, and I'm not, and I think guns should be banned, right? Like, I mean, I feel like there has to be some reasonable, thoughtful things, policies, legislation that comes into play where we can just kind of get to some sort of even keel on these things, and maybe start addressing some of the issues. But yeah,
well,
that was a long.
And if I, no, I love it. And if I can just add one, I have one little, and I don't know why I want to put this in there, but I think it's a really good example of everything we've been talking about. And here's the reality. Here's the reality we live in. At least I'm going to go back to my school district. There's all these people, we've talked about it. There's all these people that are trying to make the best, safest environment. There's all these things that are being put into motion, all to make sure the school is a safe place. We have legislation. We have, we have resources that come in, officers that are there at my school, my district. But here's the reality. There was a time when, and this happened a couple years ago with one of our children, where a fight broke out in the school, and the staff member that was there was trying to de-escalate the situation. And inadvertently, what they did is they put my child in the middle of it, because they said, hey, so-and-so, can you help me by restraining that other student? Now, it all worked out. It was fine. But in reality, as a parent, I don't know who this other student was. I don't know what kind of item they have. And I don't think this teacher meant to put my child in harm's way. But the reality is, we're in this environment where at a moment's notice, something like that happens. My kid could have been seriously hurt. Again, it could have turned out a variety of different ways. But really, that's the heart as a parent, is how do we minimize these situations more and more and more? And what kind of items do we need to put in place? What kind of policies? What kind of technology? We haven't even got into technology, and I know we probably won't be able to because time's running short. But it's like, how do we use these new resources and each other to safeguard ourselves? And I just wanted to put that example out there because it came from a very good place. It came from a need that this faculty member needed to have some support, and there was nobody else around them. So they reached out to another student to help. And as a parent, though, that's still scary for me. That's scary to know that that could have went a variety of different ways. And thankfully for everybody, it diffused the situation, and everybody walked away okay. But it would have been a completely different example to share had that not happened. And I'm aware of that, I guess, is what I'm going to say. So I just want to put that example there because I think it's important to share. Even from the best of intentions, we still have ways that we need to continue fighting to make a school very safe for all of the kids.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to dig back into when the when things started to turn, where we had not necessarily the school shootings, but when you talk about, the uptick in mental health, the uptick in just kids being defiant, those type of things. And I don't know if I would suspect there's some correlation into, there's a lot more anger out in the world. Why is that? Why are kids angry? What's going on? You talked about the bullying side of it, and I use that word even though I don't really like it, because bullying is defined, a certain way, and then you have, there's picking on, and then there's just a one-time picking on. Then there's a bullying, which is someone's taking that control or trying to take control over that person. They're, you look at, but when would that turnover or that time in life that we started to notice? Because you don't notice slowly changing. If it happened really quick, we would have noticed it. We would have been like, oh yeah, this is bad and we've got to stop it. But it's just been so slow that one day you just wake up and you're like, how did we get here? And you're right. How do we even dissect that to figure out what resources we need? Because I think sometimes we just make knee-jerk reactions, and not to blame the legislature for everything, because I think there's a lot of good intentions coming out of there. Sometimes they don't have time. Sometimes, politics play a big part, and everybody gets caught up in the moment of, okay, well, this topic's a little bit higher, so we got to focus more on this, and we put this aside. So we're just going to be like, all right, to solve this problem, we're going to do this. And maybe that's what we do on the school board too, because I'm so deep into it. Maybe that's what it is. I kind of think, I like to think that we take a little more time at the local level, because we do have a little more time than as you go up in the chain. Each state obviously has tough decisions to make, and trying to figure out. I know, and where I'm from, I think if the state's doing some things as far as like just I'll just say it. We have AEAs in our state, and they've kind of dismantled them a little bit, which is part of a big piece of the mental health and, the social and emotional piece that children need, that a lot of parents don't see how that works. And so those are programs that are really needed in our school, whether it's somebody that's just, mental crises or whatever it is, or it's, oh my gosh, I just had a brain fade. The most intellectual kid that still needs that higher education, that oh my gosh,
like advanced.
I hear these terms all the time from some of our administrators, and it's like rigor. That's the word, rigor. They just need more rigor. And I always kind of laugh that came a term out, from where I'm from, and but it resonates now in my head, and it's like, even though I couldn't remember it that minute, but those students that need more rigor because they're already at that level of, I'm just bored. What do I do? The advanced pieces of it. And so like the AEAs help with a lot of that. It's speech therapy. It's, you name it. I mean, I wished I wasn't even thinking about talking about that, but that's a piece that, they're slowly dismantling it, and it's like, if the legislature would look deeper and just communicate before, and where I'm from, there was a lot of communication about some of this stuff locally, but it wasn't being held at the state because it just kind of lambasted on everybody. And then next thing you know, it's like, oh, there's going to be some big changes, and this is going to affect school districts all around the state. And it's almost too late because the legislatures have already made their mind up that they're going to allocate the funding somewhere else.
Yeah.
And then they forget about these small pieces that are very important for our school districts, which relates around all that student assistance.
Well, and let's just put in a few buzzwords, right? Like some fire, lightning rods, right? But we're talking about not just those services like, speech therapy and, some of those, occupational therapies and some of those, but you also have the arts. You also have like, the whole DEI and inclusion. There's so many things that if we don't find value in those things, not that it all has to be all of those things, all the time, but if we don't have those things, that's how our kids learn how to have empathy for one another. That's how they learn, those social and emotional skills that are vitally important. And if we take all of those out, and I think those are probably the school districts that are scaring me the worst, are the ones that are like, oh, we don't need the social emotional learning anymore. That's not a school's place. That's a parent's place to make sure that happens. And, we've been learning social emotional skills in school since we were kids, right? I mean, it's part of school. And it's part of learning to be part of that community. So there's lots of little things that are shifting. That's kind of scary in some ways.
Yeah. And I don't want to make this come off like it's a normal or it's something but sometimes I think we forget that it's okay to not like somebody. I think we forget that it's okay that you're going to have, look, we're just not on the same page here, and your ideas aren't right. Yeah, well,
I like that a lot, Brett. I like that a lot, but because that's real.
Yeah, and I think that's where because that takes me back to the everybody gets a ribbon moment, kind of in a way, where we want everybody to be included. Absolutely. I mean, I do not want, if I want my son to go to school and I want him to be included in things, and it makes me sad if I know that he's not, or if something's just not going his way. But on the other side of it is like, okay, if somebody doesn't include you, that doesn't mean it's wrong. You've got to learn how to include yourself in some form of way too. You can't sit off the sidelines all the time and be like feeling sorry for myself of, well, those kids aren't including me. Well, one, what have you done to include yourself in a way? I mean, you're not going to go up there and you're going to, hey, get in here. I'm going to be a quarterback now. No, you have to, it's slow and methodical, and it's building that friendship, and it's trying to figure out who has the same interest as me and whatever. So in reality, we can't just say, well, we got to include everybody, because we don't know how how they fit in that dynamic. I mean, I know I just sparked an interest somewhere.
Oh, I know. Because
I have words.
Here's the thing.
Lay them on.
I love it.
Lay them on.
There's another episode right there, just in that, because just a second.
Wrap it up in one sentence, Malin. No,
simple. You can't, because I will completely debunk.
I want to hear this.
Here's the thing. One of the topics that's been going around in my mind for a while now, and Jamie, you and I have talked on elements of it, is when inclusion becomes I don't know if I want to say a bad thing or a negative thing, because I do believe that there is a part, and when we talk about inclusion, when you can go a little too far with that. And I'm not going to get into the details. I see your
we
eyes.
can also
I see
be
your
over
eyes.
equal as women. Heaven forbid we have, over equality from. No, it's funny, but
and actually speaking of that piece, in my job, I would love to have more women in my field.
mm-hmm.
I mean, I would. I mean, women are kind of getting a bad rap, with the. I don't want to turn this into a political thing, but when you look at the Secret Service, the women right now are getting a bad rap for that. I mean, right? There's some things that, okay, yeah, I guess they get what's coming from them. I mean, the one's trying to look, make sure she looks better than. At that point, it really doesn't matter what you look like. Just get the job done, And I think if people can go in there and do that. So I mean, anyway, but yeah, inclusion, I think, kind of been hit on here a little bit. But I'll just say, I think the inclusion piece comes from, and I think it's very valid on this piece, is more of this special needs pieces of it. Not that it doesn't include my son or anybody else's daughter or son, but I think when we started with the inclusion, and I could be completely off base, we wanted those students that couldn't fend for themselves or speak for themselves or be mobile like everybody else, or those are the ones that we want to be included. We want them to have the same experiences as you and I. And I think we took that a little bit too far of like, I'll give you an example. Officer-friendly poster contests is where we have in our school district, and I would have to go around and we'd have the kindergarten kids draw safety posters, and then you had to go around and you gave a first, second, or third, and then you gave a participation ribbon. Okay, well, I never really understood the participation ribbon, because it's like kindergartners. I mean, that one I could probably even give you the participation ribbon on everybody, but there are those kids that just stand out, and they deserve to be recognized too. I mean, for a kindergartner to go in there and actually read the word and be able to color within a line and get a message out exactly what, I can go up there and exactly read what that is. No misspellings. And it's like, wow. So guess what? They automatically, that's going to be a first place winner to me, And then I always struggled, because it's like, okay, now I got to find a second and a third place, because the rest I know are getting participation ribbons just for doing the work.
Well, I hate to sound like the millennial in a room full of boomers, but
wow,
you calling me old?
I'm pretty sure we're probably all in the same age group, but at the same time,
I'll surprise you. Off record, I'll tell you how old I am.
Okay. I guess I would just, and I do, because I do feel there are advantages that I had being raised the way I was, right? There are advantages in coping and resiliency and things like that. But at the same time, I do feel like there's space for growth. There's space for us to grow as a community, as a society, to say, okay, these things were acceptable before and now they're not acceptable, and that's okay. We can still learn the skills in between, and it doesn't have to change the fabric of whatever. And that's, I think that's where it's probably, yeah, I'll just get off my soapbox for a minute.
Well, and I will say, just as Jamie comes off, I think learning that, though, is also understanding there could be times in a variety of different topics that we've gone too far. And when do we need to start pulling some stuff back, and what does that look like? And quite frankly, everything we've been talking about, even this inclusion piece, I think that's fair game. That's fair game to take a look to say, have we gone too far? And when you just say the word inclusion and have you gone too far, the answer is no. But I think when you look at it, I think that's where the nuances come out. And I do think it's a valid question to ask, to say what is reasonable and what is expected and what is helpful. And to me, there's some practices that we can talk about maybe in a different episode, where I think we could talk about those seriously, and I think they should be talked about. And I don't think there should be anything that's above scrutiny and to look at and to say, we made these decisions. Now let's go back and see what the outcomes are. And are they the outcomes we were wanting? And if not, where do we need to pivot? What do we need to change? And so I second that, Jamie. I just think you and I think of those two terms in different ways. And I think that's the conversation.
But inclusion, I mean, that actually is a great topic. I don't know how, if I'd want to be included on that completely, because I would end up being enemies with Jamie, but and not taking sides here. I mean, just jokingly, but let's take school shooters for instance, because I think this does tie, to get us back into that school safety piece. I think the inclusion piece does have a little bit to do with that. Is these people feel outcast. They feel like they're not included or whatever is going on. And that's where I guess I get to that when I make my comment about, you have to do a little bit too to include yourself, because not everybody has the same interests. When those kids feel that they're being picked on because they're a little bit different. Well, it's how do we figure out how to get these, when we talk the inclusion, how do we figure out how to get everybody on the same page and like everything? Is you're never going to do that. There's no way you're going to everybody get to do that. And if I like playing, I've got some people that work for me that like playing Dungeons and Dragons. When I grew up, Dungeons and Dragons, I was thinking that when it first came out. Well, it came out a long time before me, from what I understand. Well, I'll kind of give you away I was an 80s child. I remember Dungeons and Dragons from people playing it when I was probably 16, 17. I've never played it. I don't even know anything about it. And I never heard anything else about it probably when I was maybe 20. And now I'm a lot older than that. 50s. And now I'm hearing a lot about it from people that are in their mid 20s to late 20s, maybe early 30s. I don't have an interest in that. I don't know anything about it, And so if someone said, "Hey, do you want to play Dungeons and Dragons?" I'd probably be like, "Okay, hey," but it wouldn't be on the top of my list. But if you said, "Hey, let's go watch a wrestling meet," I'm in that all day long. Let's go watch a football game. I'm in that. And I'm not even into football. I'm not even sports that much. So to me, those are two different. If somebody said, "Hey, let's," like I was telling you, I was trying to read this book. I'm not a book reader. So if someone said, "Do you want to join a book club?" Yep, I'm out. I'm probably not going to join that group. You know what I mean? And it's like, but I want to hang with those people. I mean, those people that are all over there reading that book, because I've got people around me reading that book that are reading it. My wife, is an avid book reader. And it's like, I want to spend time with you, but I just don't read that. I just don't read as fast. I mean, does that make sense? Yeah. And so I think when we get into these school shooters, they feel they don't have a place, and people make them feel like they don't have a place. I don't know. I'd like to dissect that a little bit more into my mind, because it's just a topic that's just interesting.
Yeah. I would love to come back around with you on another topic and maybe inclusion and kind of expand upon that. I think that'd be great. I do look at I'm looking at the time, and I think we probably should maybe start wrapping things up, just because
I was going to say, we better listen this time, because Malin's mentioned the time 3 times now. That when it's repeated, it's important. So
yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Well,
and as time is coming to an end for the fourth, no, just kidding.
All right, let's wrap this up.
Yeah. So Brett, again, thank you so much for coming on and providing your opinion and bringing some of your past experiences and your current experiences with you. It did help me as a parent be able even to talk to somebody who has those, to say, well, what about this and what about that? And you've given me some things that I need to think about. So I do appreciate that. I have a last question that I want to ask you, and it's meant to be last because I only need 2 seconds of your time. But I do want to say just thank you for coming on. So it's been a pleasure.
Yeah, I've appreciated it also. And I'm positive any subject you come on, I promise you won't walk away as enemy number 2 or
No,
3.
I'm
So
just,
it'll be fine.
yeah.
It'll be fine.
No, I've got a good friend on the school board that was with me, and that person is like all Democratic. I mean, there's, you even mention the letter R around her and she gets a little fidgety. But we have.
So you've been friends with Jamie a long time too, I see.
Yeah,
Okay, all
there
right.
you go. Well, I kind of see your guys' relationship like that with ours, and but it's good to agree and it's good to disagree,
Yeah.
because you do learn a lot from each other, and I guess that's what makes life good about it. And if people could do that, I'm not saying I'm perfect and that's the best answer, because I think but if I was stuck in my ways and never got outside of that, I've eaten a lot of crow in my life, and I tell people
Me
that
too.
I tell people that a lot of time. My opinions are so strong that I get gut checked once in a while, and it's okay. I may not like it at first. I'd be like, okay, maybe you're right. But I'm comfortable with it, and it's just like. But I think the opinions, if they're not talked about, not necessarily my opinions, but everybody's opinions aren't talked about, then I think that's where the world kind of gets crazy, and we lose just, I guess, the old, that banter, I guess, of being able to learn to,
Coexist.
well, your shoes, you don't look very good in those shoes,
Yeah.
or, I mean,
Well, or growing up, I heard walk a mile in somebody else's shoes. That meant something, right? Like you try to put yourself in their spots. You try to understand, try to get in their mind and see from their perspective why they're doing things. No, it seems like nobody wants to do that anymore. Nobody's
What do
comfortable
we call
doing
that?
So
Empathy.
now you call it empathy.
Well,
Jamie.
but everybody does seem to venture around people of same likes, and that's normal. And
Yeah.
But you're not. It's not a bad thing to get outside of your bubble once in a while and talk about it. But no, it's been. I hope I didn't offend anybody. I hope everybody enjoyed the conversations. I guess that's the main thing, is just making sure that one. I'll reiterate. I'm not an expert on any of this. These are completely my opinions of just things. I'm not locked solid on a lot of things in life. But there are some things when it comes to safety. It's usually just, we can always do better on safety, no matter what you're doing, whether it's your home safety, school safety, work safety. Just make sure everybody is always vigilant of what their surroundings are, and communicate. If the parents will communicate with their kids on what they want, support the school staff and just the people that they're around, whether it's a daycare provider, teacher. If they're outside of the parents' control, respect them. And I think that's where we lose a lot of this, is the respect for, the parents have their ideologies and, beliefs, but yet when you get outside that house, there might be somebody that believes something a little different than you, and don't, so.
You're talking about resilience. I completely agree with that. That I do agree with.
So Brett, here's my last question, and it's not related to anything we've talked about.
Okay.
So, and Jamie, I don't know if you know I was going to ask this or not, but we have had a topic that has been haunting us since season 1 that we've been trying to find someone to talk to us about. And that has been book banning. We had an episode early on in season 1, and a lot of people reacted to it. So I don't know if that's a topic you would be interested in coming on and talking, but from a school district, just any, again, I'm assuming they're different or not. Can you give us any insight onto how, in 30 seconds or less, like I don't need a big in-depth thing. And if you want to come on and talk about it, we'll be more than happy to do that. But can you just help shed some light on how does normally in the school district that you're in, do you know how books get brought into the school system?
Yeah. So, at least in our district, books come in. Sometimes they come in just big stacks. It's like just a bundle of books, and you may not even know what's in that bundle, because it may be like a topic of this, and I can't even give you a good example. but it may be children's books. Okay, so it's labeled children's book, and it's I'm gonna go fantasy. Okay, so now what that one little piece may be. Okay, it says fantasy, so what's in here? What's imagination or whatever? So how do we know what's in every single one of those books? You don't. The way we find out though is if there's some material in a book is sometimes you have to find out by just that. Somebody reading and the parent goes, "Oh my goodness, what?" I don't want my kid to read that. And then the book comes back in and it's like, okay, then they have a little committee that looks at it and then they make the decision of, okay, this book needs to, I wouldn't say banned, but it has to have some restrictions on it. You can't, it's not going to be, and that's where I think, in my opinion, where people think it's book banning, it's more of just book, we're regulating on who gets to see it without parental. If there's things in there and really quick, and I probably should come back and talk a little bit more because I have a lot of opinions on this, but I will say I'm not into book banning. I'm not into book banning, but I am the regulations of it because I think what you teach in your house, as long as it's not against the law or it's not harmful to children, I'm not going to say I 100% agree with some of the things that have been in the topics as far as what people think are book banning. I think what you teach your kid at home is kind of your business, as long as it's not hurting the child in any way, it's not detrimental to anybody's safety. You do what you do in your home, no different than what relationships you have in your home. Okay, but don't put that on. That shouldn't be put on the school. I think public schools are, I mean, they're public, don't get me wrong, but I don't think we should require a teacher to say, this is okay for Brett to read. Mm-hmm. All right.
I think we definitely need to keep a conversation outside of this recording going because I want to have that conversation, and it has been so requested so many times. We need to put a wrapper on it, and so let's definitely continue that conversation. But thanks for bringing that up, Malin. After talking about winding it down 3 times, way to go.
We had our listeners, I know they'd be like, wait a minute, he's on a school board? Ask him the question.
Yeah, this is true. Yeah. This is so true.
So I mean, really quick, it's definitely worth talking about and getting it out there because I don't know. I mean, that is one I'm closer to the fence on both sides of that one because it's like, man, it's like I wouldn't want my kids to read some of those books that are out there that's talking about those things. That's not it's just not where I'm at. Yeah. So definitely another time. Definitely another time.
Oh, yes. Because I guarantee you might be in the middle. JB and I are not. So this will be a good conversation.
Well, Eileen, I'm going to, off the top, I'm thinking I'm probably going to be on your side. Just,
it's not a surprise or anything new. It's okay. I'm an island.
Yeah. Well, really quick, as I was doing my campaigning, I went up and was talking to a group of people, and they said, "Well, what do you think about book banning?" I said, "You got any questions?" I said, "I sure would love to have your vote." And they said, "Well, what do you think about book banning?" I go, "What books are you talking about?" And she said, "What do you mean, what books?" And she got pretty angry with me, and I said, "No, I don't know if we I mean, it really depends on the book." And I think what she was looking for me is to say these specific books. And I said, I'm not going to ban any book unless I know what the topic is. I mean, how can you just say because, which was it was big open conversation, but she wasn't willing to talk about it. And she said, well, I'm not signing your petition to get on the school board. And I said, okay, well, I'm sorry. I mean, I'd be more than happy to finish talking about this. But because I said I wasn't willing to ban books, she wasn't. And I'm like, well, okay, you're not even wanting to listen to my side of it. So,
there's the theme of our podcast, being willing to listen, right?
Yeah. But anyway, well, hey, thanks for having me. I appreciate the invite, and hopefully it was worth something.
Yes.
It was.
Thank you so
It
much
was.
for joining us. We really have appreciated
and feel free
it.
to reach out after this, and we can talk about how I really did, and then give me the good feedback. Say, hey, we can't even use any of this; it's so horrible. And then any other
The after
stuff.
call will be rough for you, Brett. I'm just going to say that right now.
At this point, I'm trying to figure out how we're going to cut this into 2 episodes. So no,
Right?
I just want to thank you again for coming on, and thank everyone, every one of you, our listeners, for joining us with this episode of Roundtable Mindset. We hope you've enjoyed it as much as we have, and we'll see you again next time around the roundtable.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.